mind, it'd be perfect.
Yeah, so just want to kind of welcome everybody to an additional webinar that we've scheduled, which is wonderful because we don't always have, we often seek out those of us on the programs committee, Michael and Carlene, myself, and Sheldon, and some others on the call here, normally seek out presenters for the workshops that we do, the free workshops on behalf of our members. And it's nice when somebody actually approaches us. So that's what happened with this workshop, and the timing on it could not have been any better because this is an issue that we are all dealing with, right? This is something that's happening to all of our organizations right now. And Immigrants in the Crosshairs, I think, is a really important topic to discuss. So we have our sessions presented by our friends over at Central One Federal Credit Union. And today we hear from our friends at Carter Law Group. So Kirk is an attorney there. He founded his family began their roots back when their ancestors fled England to escape religious persecution. So he can certainly understand some of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. He has been involved in work with this topic for many years, along with Kate, who is joining him today as another attorney at their firm. They're new to our chamber, and we're excited to have Carter Law Group here working with us and helping us as we all deal with immigration law issues at the moment. The program today that Kirk and Kate will be presenting on really is focused, which is a little bit different than some of the other ones I've attended so far, is really focused on attendees who are either undocumented immigrants themselves, people who have green cards. I myself, as an HR person, have recently gotten a lot of questions about green card from the supervisors who work for our organizations, certainly for employers who discover that they employ someone who might be undocumented, or even somebody who is working for them who might have a green card. And then certainly any of us who are focused on just what is happening in the world and around us in Milford, in Nantucket. I was just there a couple weekends ago when everything was happening there. And the takeaways we're going to get from today are how to handle what might happen if somebody were to show up at your business, what's going on right now in the border in the communities, what to do in terms of paperwork and the show your papers term that we've been all hearing on the news, and then just in general, our rights as Americans in terms of what we should understand when employees come to us, coworkers come to us, neighbors come to us, whatnot. So very happy that our friends at Central One are here to help us support this event and provide it free for all of you. And again, sorry for running in at the last minute.
Terrific. Thank you for having us here. I'm Kirk Carter, co-founder of the Carter Law Group. As Betsy said, we are an immigration boutique firm. We're based here in Southborough. We're not necessarily new to the area, or I've been in the area for 30 plus years. Most of my time in practice was with the law firm of Fletcher, Tilton, and Whipple, which is based in Worcester, and we recently spun off. There are two attorneys, Kate and myself, and 5 paralegals, and our job is providing immigration and visa solutions for individuals, for companies, helping them navigate the difficult world of immigration. And we certainly are finding ourselves in a very unique situation today with all that's going on. So we've got some slides here. If we could start with those, and we can advance to the next slide, which is just the sort of heading. One more. Okay, so we can go to the next. That's our introductory one, Immigrants in the Crosshairs, and Betsy's sort of explained to you what we're going to talk about today and what the takeaway should be. Essentially, we're living in one of the more unusual times in our history as a nation. Our immigration system, I think, admittedly, is broken. Our president has declared our country to be at war with due to what he identifies as a immigrant invasion. He's invoked wartime powers, which were last used after September 11th and prior to that, World War II, which is under which he's claiming to suspend due process relative to certain immigrations issues and certain immigrants, empowering ICE to arrest whomever they like without putting them through the typical process of court hearing and evidence and a right to challenge their removal. This is often referred to as the suspension of due process. Individuals, we've heard through the news and on TV, that various individuals have just sort of been picked up, put on planes, and disappeared without the traditional rights and constitutional benefits that we're accustomed to. Just yesterday, a travel ban went into effect. Not the same kind of ban that Trump originally did, which was a Muslim ban, but this one here is focused on 19 different nations that are perceived as having lax immigration clearance activities, and therefore it's about 500 million people, 450 million people who live in those 19 countries who are not going to be able to travel to the US starting yesterday. We're also seeing attacks on foreign students, particularly at Harvard University. The administration has tried to take away Harvard's ability to enroll foreign students, and about 20 or 25% of their student body are foreign students. The university has pushed back and gotten a restraining order against the administration, but there are also other universities, colleges, foreign students are definitely in the crosshairs as part of the immigration process or the immigration enforcement. Obviously, fear and anxiety is on the rise. You may have experienced some of that at your workplace or amongst conversations with friends and people who might be impacted either directly because of their immigrant situation or because of their business and some of the folks who may work for them or provide them with supplies or assist them in some other way. Next. Enhanced enforcement, immigration. What we have seen, obviously, are these raids, and some of them in spectacular fashion, where the goal is really to sort of create shock and awe and bring attention and sort of leverage the opportunity to make an example of a business or a particular community. Historically, sanctuary cities and churches, schools, hospitals were not targets of such raids, but the administration has changed the policy, making those now open game. And we have had a number of schools and other social service agencies who have reached out to us, very concerned about what they do if ICE shows up on their doorstep, and how do they prepare, and should they have a policy, and how do they educate their front desk people to respond to such unique situations. The government or the administration is reallocating money from different departments to immigration enforcement. Congress hasn't given them the money that they want or hasn't approved a budget yet. So they are sort of pulling money from various places, and they are trying to reallocate to leverage as much as they can the dollars, the resources, the individuals that are available. Amongst that is they are attempting, the president right now has called up the National Guard and sent them into Los Angeles, which many perceive as a provocative situation that perhaps either escalated rather than de-escalated the situation there. ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They're the immigration police branch of the government. They are working more and more collaboratively with states and local police enforcement. We're seeing a lot more of that in red states where they're much more sympathetic to the cause of reducing the number of immigrants in the United States, less so in blue states like Massachusetts. Some cities do have engaged or entered agreements with immigration to allow their police enforcement here in Massachusetts, but most have not because they perceive it as a interference between their ability to do local policing and to establish and maintain good relations with communities that are facing other forms of crime and violence. Extreme vetting is something that we are seeing outside the US, that is, even inside the US, where background checks and vetting of individuals who are applying for visas to come to the US are being significantly enhanced and increased and delayed. And we're seeing similar things here in the United States. Ultimately, shock and awe is what they are providing and what we're seeing. And obviously the attendance of the seminar indicates that people are concerned and people are worried and need to understand what's going on. Next slide. Okay. Executive actions are how a lot of this has been taking place because the law is the law, and the Congress has not been able to pass a immigration bill since the 1950s that substantively addresses the issues and the problems and the complexities of immigration law. So the president has taken his pen and decided to enact a series of policies which he believes he has the authority to do, and obviously folks are in court trying to challenge some of these, saying he doesn't have the authority. Among those are an expansion of the expedited removal program, which used to be that, you know, if you made your way illegally into the United States and you were discovered within 2 weeks, within 100 miles of the border, they could treat you as though you were not here, and in essence, take you to the border and send you back to Canada or Mexico. Trump has expanded that to a nationwide, so they can pick you up anywhere. And instead of it being 14 days and you are here on US soil and entitled to the constitutional protections that we all typically enjoy, they're saying they've got 2 years now to pick someone up, to deprive them of the usual court process and hearings and send them back or send them out of the country. Registration process has been revived. We last saw this after 9/11, where essentially the government said everyone from certain countries have to register. Now it is everyone who is not a citizen, not a green card holder, has to register, has to provide evidence that they're here in the US legally, and now they're required to carry those papers with them and show them upon demand. Much like we used to see in the Western Bloc, prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall. Police officers can stop people, and ICE can stop people on the streets and at your place of business and say, show me your papers, and if they don't provide those papers, they have now committed a crime for which they can be arrested. That criminalization is controversial and is also being challenged and creates real quandaries for lawyers and folks like Kate and I to try to tell people what they should do, because if we tell them what they by law are required to do, they are in essence putting themselves in the crosshairs even more and setting themselves up for a visit. So it's a difficult situation. There are lots of people, and you may employ some of them here, who have been on quasi statuses like temporary protected status or parole. These are not people who have green cards, but there are rules and laws that say that people from countries who would be in danger if we sent them back to their home country because of a war in Ukraine, or because of a earthquake in Haiti, or because of some civil unrest in a particular country, we've in the past allowed those people to remain in the US, give them temporary protected status. The administration is closing down a lot of that, refusing to renew extended periods for different countries. And so some of the folks that have been able to provide work authorization to you in the past and get it renewed are no longer going to be able to do that. There have been challenges in the court. So far, the courts, originally the Supreme Court has sort of allowed several of those terminations to move forward, subject to the fact that they still are being litigated in the lower courts. Government is actually offering people they're telling them, we'll give you $1,000 and we'll send you back to your home country, at no expense to you. And they are making some statements. Its complaint is that they're not telling them the truth, and just basically saying this, you can do this and it won't cause you any harm, or you won't be in trouble. There are rules that say if you leave the country and you try to come back, you can't come back for 10 years. So there's concern that they're not being given the full picture and told that not only you're getting $1,000, but you can't come back for 10 years, even if you've got a degree or a work visa or things of that sort. You won't be able to get those. We already talked about the travel ban that went into effect yesterday. There's quite a few countries on the list. The extreme vetting powers as well. Next slide. Okay, so who's impacted by these actions? Obviously, the folks themselves who are undocumented. Many of them are married to US citizens. Some have US citizen children. So there are children and family members who are involved. We heard the other day about a undocumented immigrant who was picked up and was removed to a third country. And her US citizen children, including a child who had brain cancer, were put on the plane with her. I suspect that the family could have left the child here in the United States, but the mother was told, you'll never see your child again if you don't take your child with you. So there's a lot of really heart-wrenching, difficult circumstances and situations that we're seeing underway. When this effort began, we were told that this was to get rid of the criminals in the US, the murderers and the rapists, and all the unsavory characters. But we're seeing the impact of this expanding well beyond those who had been targeted by prior administrations for removal, and just as basically extending to everyday people who you may know, may see on the street, may serve you your coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, or bag your groceries at the Hannaford's. Companies and non-for-profits that either support them or sell goods to them. You may have employees there who are impacted by this. You may have contractors. You may be selling produce that was picked by migrant labor. There are a lot of impacts of this beyond just the undocumented themselves, and roll over to the economy, to the business community. Obviously, friends and relatives, and we're seeing a huge uptick in US citizens and green card holders who themselves are fearful for traveling, who are coming in for consultations with us saying, am I safe to travel? If I leave, will I be let back in? I'm hearing that my social media is going to be scrutinized, and if I ever criticize the government or attended a rally for women's power, or for the rights of Palestinians, or any sort of cause, that this will be held against me and I may be determined to be inadmissible. So there are broad impacts throughout the community, and obviously a lot of concern. Next slide. Impacts on your business and the economy. I've alluded to some already. Obviously, there's confusion, there's fear, anxiety. We're hearing stories of employees that just aren't showing up because they fear that there may be a raid at the workplace, or they heard that there was one in the neighboring community, and so therefore they're not going to work today, or they're living in the shadows. Possible loss of employees if, in fact, there is a job site raid and someone's taken away from your place of business. This obviously, we've already suffered for many years from the shortage of qualified labor or available labor to fill various jobs, roles. There's a major skills gap here in the US relative to high-level education, high-level science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and we deal with a lot of those folks in the IT industry and some of the other life science industries. But it also impacts some of the lower skilled workers who are filling the jobs that you just can't find Americans to perform. So supply chain concerns, obviously immigrants play a role from farming to shipping to logistics. That is to a smaller extent so far had a modest impact, but we can suspect that that's going to increase over time, as are the impacts of the tariff wars on foreign products, which are going to raise the cost of those products and perhaps make it difficult for you to sell certain products and get them on your shelves to begin with as a result of supply chain and get them into customers' hands. In essence, we're faced now with a constitutional crisis because the administration is testing the boundaries of its limits. And many would say has well overstepped those boundaries. And the Supreme Court has, in a couple of instances, pushed back and, in essence, said, yes, you've gone over the line. And so there's this tension that's going on with lots of challenges to the actions of the administration. And obviously, none of this is contributing in a positive way to the financial instability. The stock market is erratic and going up huge amounts on certain days and then down dramatically on other days. And we continue to experience inflationary pressures, which are likely to increase. Next page. Challenges and limits to enforcement. The bedrock of our democracy is our Constitution. Most importantly, the first 10 amendments of it, which are the Bill of Rights. And those Bill of Rights, basically, the first part of the Constitution itself talks about the government and what the government can do and what the government will do and how it should be organized and things of that sort. The founders originally said, well, we're concerned that we're making the government too big, too powerful, and said we need a Bill of Rights that protects the individual, who protects each and every one of us who live here in the country. And that Bill of Rights consists of the first 10 amendments and one would argue some amendments after that, subsequent amendments. In terms of immigration law, the law is passed by Congress and signed by the president. And as I mentioned, we haven't had a major overhaul of the immigration law or a comprehensive one since the 1950s, when the current Immigration and Nationality Act was passed by Congress. We do have various tweaks to the law over the years. We have agency regulations that direct immigration and tell people what their policies and processes are to be processed for a green card or for a work authorization or for advanced parole or things of that sort. But within the agency, they have policy priorities. This administration has prioritized the removal of as many immigrants as possible. And they are working their policies and their guidance to support their objective and their agenda. Obviously, the federal courts is where we see the challenges that are taking place back and forth. Next slide. And the rights that are amended and that are being litigated here are rights around First Amendment in terms of speech and assembly. Why should I be punished for participating in a peaceful rally if that's what you did? Fourth Amendment, which deals with unreasonable searches and seizures. Was I given appropriate notice before you came in and ripped me from my place of work or from my home? Fifth Amendment rights, are people aware that they are not required to respond to or answer questions? They can demand an attorney. That all comes under the Fifth Amendment for protective of individual rights. And most importantly, the 14th Amendment, which establishes what we call the Due Process Clause. And due process is just a concept that the government has to treat you fairly and give you a hearing before it deprives you or anyone present in the United States from their life, liberty, or property. Next slide. There have been successes and losses in the courts. You probably heard the other day, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was summarily removed from the United States without any hearing, without any evidence, without any formal indictment, and sent to El Salvador to a maximum security prison there, married to a US citizen, I believe, or green card holder. The Supreme Court told them that the administration had to facilitate his return. They said they couldn't. Ultimately, they brought him back and brought him back to a criminal indictment, which some question whether it's legitimate or not, but he will get his day in court, and the government will either have to prove that he is a criminal and then take appropriate action as a result of that, or allow a jury of his peers to determine whether or not he is innocent and should be left alone. Other successes we've seen have been that attack by the administration against Harvard University, trying to shut down their ability to enroll foreign students. That has been enjoined from moving forward. But that all of these continue to be in litigation. So various from day to day, week to week, the status of different cases may change. Now, on the losses side, SCOTUS, which just stands for the Supreme Court of the United States, has approved or has allowed, well, let me put it this way, they've removed a temporary restraining order that prevented the administration from terminating people at TPS who were from Venezuela. And they have allowed termination of a parole program that affected a number of countries, each letter addressing a particular country. And so what had been the lower courts had said you can't do that, SCOTUS has said you can continue doing that while the cases move their way through the court system, and assumably we'll get back up to the Supreme Court later on for them to either validate or invalidate the lower court's readings or reasoning or decisions. Next. Okay, so how to respond to enforcement actions. Most importantly, don't panic. Tell your employees not to panic. Stay calm, don't run, argue, resist. Most importantly, know what your rights are, because otherwise you are in essence unarmed, and you can, in essence, will be compliant and do whatever you're asked to do. As I mentioned, we all have constitutional rights and protections, among them to not answer questions, to demand an attorney, to not provide evidence against yourself. And so it's important that we communicate that to various people that might be impacted by this, including friends, relatives, neighbors, employees. Understanding the limits of your duties are also important, because if you assert your duties beyond that which you are entitled to, you might be accused of or even charged with resisting arrest or interference with justice. And so you need to know what you can do and what you can't do. And obviously, encouraging impacted individuals to consult an immigration attorney. It's a very scary, difficult time for folks who are undocumented. There are a lot of agencies, a lot of attorneys, a lot of resources that are available. We're going to take a look at some of them in a bit, where you can find out how you can get help, how you can prepare yourself for possible interactions with ICE. Next screen. So what are your rights? I've already sort of reiterated or have stated that in the US, regardless of your immigration status, you have certain rights and protections under the Constitution, under the Due Process Clause. There is a document, there's a picture of it here, it's called a red card. We are encouraging people who are undocumented or who are concerned about their status to carry these with them. On the one side, it has in English their invocation of their rights, which is telling them what they can and cannot do, and what they can resist or refuse to do. And on the other side, it has it in their native language. So we have these in our office here in Spanish and Portuguese and Arabic. And they're at our front reception desk, and anyone who's interested in picking some of those up, taking them to church or taking them to a civic group or handing them to a neighbor or someone they know who's worried or concerned, they're available and they're free to be picked up here. They're also available online. In essence, what it allows the individual to do is in their native language, familiarize themselves with what their rights are and to invoke them by handing this card to an immigration officer, in which it basically tells them, I will not answer questions, I request an attorney, you cannot come into my home, you cannot enter the workplace, things of that sort, and helps them to assert their rights and can make a difference in circumstances. Next. Okay, we have recently launched a valuable tool on our website, which Kate's going to show you and show you how to navigate, which provides both individuals and employers with a variety of tools and guidance on how to handle immigration-related enforcement actions. Obviously, we only have an hour here today, so we can't go through everything, but we have collected on our website an immigration action alert, and Kate's going to show you how to find that, how to use it, and what you can find there. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kate LeBeau.
Thank you, Kirk, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for having me. As Kirk said, I'm going to walk through a little bit of some guidance we have on our website, and which you can refer back to in the future if you have some more questions. As I'm talking through this, if you have any specific questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And when I'm wrapping up on this section, we're going to have a question and answer period available. So please feel free to add those in if you have any questions. Patty, if you could bring us to the website, please. So this is our homepage website, and which will have a lot of different types of information, but what we're trying to focus on right now is this immigration action alert, which really deals with what's happening now and how you can, as a business owner and as a community member, respond to that. So there's two places to find that. One is at the way bottom of the screen, we have this little immigration action alert you can click on, or at the top header under resources, there's also a link to that. So if we can check that out, thank you. And we kind of broke this out into two main parts, as you can see, one for yourself or your family and another for your business. And given that we're presenting here with a quarter, we're going to focus on the business side questions, but certainly encourage you to check back on to yourself and your family if any of those might apply to you or people you care about. So if we maybe check on this first box, what to do if immigration comes to your workplace. So under each of these questions, we have a kind of a little blurb and then a link to a much more detailed resource on kind of steps to take or how to prepare. So I'm not going to go through all this. As you can see, it's an 8-page document, but it does go through kind of the two specific types of, or two main types of immigration enforcement that can happen at a workplace. So one is an I-9 audit, which, hopefully all employers are complying with I-9 rules, which is when you hire any employee, you need to document their employment authorization status, whether they're a U.S. citizen or if they have a green card or a valid work visa. So that needs to be documented on an I-9 form within 3 days of the employee starting. And the employer needs to keep those records on file. And ICE, or the enforcement arm of the Department of Homeland Security, can show up at an employer's place of business and ask to see those records. And if there's been any failure in compliance, or it's turned out that you haven't completed the I-9s or haven't completed them correctly, there can be penalties or fines issued against the employer. So definitely important to be maintaining those I-9s. There has been some information coming out from the administration that they're maybe planning to increase these types of enforcement actions. If you have questions about I-9 compliance, we're certainly happy to help with that. But I think a good general kind of first thing to know about any kind of I-9 audit is that you have 3 days to respond. So if they come, you don't need to immediately turn over those I-9 forms. They should give you 3 days, and 3 days in that, as soon as they leave, we encourage you to contact us, or another immigration attorney can help kind of prepare that response. And the other main type of enforcement action that can happen in a workplace that a lot of people are concerned about and hearing about in the news is what's generally called a raid, is when immigration officers come with the intention to see if you have undocumented individuals there that could be detained. And so there's kind of a detailed advice in this document. The first one being, really, this is not something you want to be surprised by. If it happens, you want to have a plan in place ahead of time. And that starts with, informing yourself and your staff about what to expect and what you can and can't do. So the first thing being, if you have a receptionist, that's how your business works. You want that person to know how to respond if an officer comes up. And what this document recommends, and which we would recommend too, is you might want to tell them, I don't have the authority to speak with you, officer. I need to contact my employer. The next thing you want to think about is, or the checking is if they have a warrant. So ICE, anyone in the public, including ICE officers, is allowed to be in the public spaces of your business. So say the waiting room, or if you have a restaurant, they can be in the dining area. But unless they have a judicial warrant, they can't go to the private areas of your business. So, you know, the back offices, again, in the kitchen and of your restaurant, if that's your type of business, they would need either your permission to enter those spaces or a warrant. And it has to be a judicial warrant. We stress this a lot in the immigration context because sometimes these officers will have what's called an administrative warrant, which is will be issued by a Department of Homeland Security official, which is not the same as a judicial warrant, which is signed by a judge, either of a U.S. district court or less frequently in the immigration context, but theoretically possible a state court, Massachusetts state court judge. So you definitely want to check if any officials have a warrant before permitting them to enter your private areas of your business. And then kind of the basic guidelines at that point is you don't need to help the ICE officers if they are looking to verify the immigration status of your employees, but you can't hinder them either. As Kirk mentioned, you could then be, you know, accused of interfering with law enforcement if you were to say, usher employees out a back door or help them hide. But you also don't need to, you know, help identify employees for ICE officers or help kind of separate them into groups of these people have green cards or these people are from some certain countries. You know, they can kind of do that work on their own. And as we had just mentioned with the red cards, the employees have those same rights if they're at work or at home in terms of not speaking or, you know, right to remain silent or right to not sign anything, to say they want an attorney. So these are kind of all good things to keep in mind, especially in the current climate, and make a plan if you were to see ICE come to your business place. And now, Patty, if you can maybe take us back to the website and we'll go. So this second question about having an action plan kind of goes hand in hand with the first. And we have a link to another resource here, which has a lot of the same information, but is a little bit more condensed. This is a 2-pager. So if you're kind of overwhelmed by 8 pages of information, this kind of has a much more targeted list of recommendations, but this is only specific to those ICE raids and not I-9 compliance and I-9 audits. So if you're concerned about both, please check out both. But this, yeah, is a good place to start for an action plan. We also have these next 2 points are on the requirements about registration and carrying the evidence of registration. So I guess, Patty, we can start with the first updated registration requirement for non-citizens. So this is basically anyone who's not a citizen has to register with the government. And some people are automatically registered by virtue of an immigration process they've done before. So anyone who has a green card is automatically registered. Anyone who obtained a visa and their passport abroad is automatically registered. So some people don't need to do anything because they've already been registered, but they should probably check, right? Other people, especially those that are undocumented or less documented, are required by law to register. And there's a government website where individuals register. As Kirk said, you know, this is kind of a tricky area for us because by registering, you know, you're also presenting yourself to the government. So we're kind of explaining to clients what the process is and what the legal consequences of doing it and of not doing it are, and have to always advise people to follow the law, but also want to make sure that they are informed of the complete situation. As Kirk mentioned, failure to register is a federal misdemeanor offense, and there has been some reporting of a few enforcement actions or arrests or charges for that. I think it hasn't happened too much yet, but we'll see what the future holds. So this is a good resource to check, you know, if you have employees who ask questions about this or people in your community, it will list what types of people are already registered and don't need to take any steps to register now versus those who are not considered to have been registered and need to take an affirmative step to register. Otherwise, they could be criminally charged with a misdemeanor for failing to register. And Patty, if we can go back to the website and check out that next resource on the carry requirements. So kind of hand in hand with registration is non-citizens are also supposed to carry with them at all times proof of their status and registration. So green card holders are actually required by law to have their green card with them at all times. Which I would, I don't like to carry my passport with me at all times. For example, you worry that could get lost or stolen. Same thing with a green card, but the law says you're supposed to carry a green card. We would recommend people at least keep a copy or scan of any important document like a green card in a safe place in case the green card is lost or stolen. Other proof of status would be an EAD or work permit card, or that C option you can see on the more right-hand side of the screen, which is a government-issued photo ID, which could be a passport or a driver's license. Form I-94 for your most recent entry. So that's when you enter the United States, the government will issue a document showing kind of when does your status expire, or there might be other status-specific documentation which will vary by your status, like a document from your school if you're a student here on a student visa status. So again, if you have employees or family members or people in your community who are concerned about this requirement to carry proof of registration, this is another resource you could refer to see what documents will satisfy that requirement. And Patty, if we could head back to the main screen. We also mentioned about foreign students being at risk. As employers, maybe some might ask, well, what do foreign students have to do with my employees? But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of foreign students who are authorized to work. So most foreign students are authorized for at least 1 year of what's called optional practical training, or OPT, after they graduate. And students who have studied in STEM fields get another few years after that. So you might have employees who are still technically on student status, even though they've graduated, because they have employment authorization for practical training after they graduate. And of course, students with degrees are often who employers are looking for. So you might have future folks coming to you or applying to you with student status looking to change to another type of status in the future. As you probably have seen in the reporting, and as Kirk has mentioned, there's been a lot of focus on students' visas right now and student status, including revoking the status for some students, and especially in the case of Harvard, and we'll see if this goes out to additional universities or colleges later on, even attempting to revoke the authority of the university to invite or sponsor foreign students to come. So it's something to be aware of, especially if you do employ or students or individuals with that optional practical training authorization, that they really need to be careful about not violating the terms of their status. So, that could be by taking another job that they haven't been authorized to do, by overstaying. Well, excuse me, that doesn't generally happen for students, but it is important that students are kind of very strict in their compliance with their status, especially right now, because they could risk losing that status, and then you as an employer potentially losing, a vital employee. And other considerations about employing international workers are about them traveling internationally. So should your employees risk travel? There's a lot of new considerations right now about this. And so we have a couple pieces of guidance here. So thank you, Patty. Click on the first. We would recommend, having some type of overall guidance for employees or policies about international travel. And so this is a sample one that we have prepared, but it can depend on your company and your the needs of your employees. But there's a lot of different types of immigration status. There's a lot of different countries people could be coming from, and it can really depend on the specific situation what risks you might face in traveling right now. One of the first thing listed here is if you need a new visa stamp, reconsider travel. So there's a lot of documentation involved in immigration. One is having a valid visa stamp to enter, and another is about how long is your status good in the United States. So there might be someone in the United States with valid status, but if they travel, they need to get a new visa before they can come back in. If that applies to you or to an employee, we encourage you at this point to really consider whether this trip is necessary because of that extreme vetting that's been happening at the consulates that Kirk mentioned. You might be stuck, or your employee may be stuck outside the country for longer than you anticipated while they're doing extensive or additional background checks before issuing you a new visa to come back. Travel with a green card is generally okay, but there are some circumstances that can flag someone with a green card even at the border as being more of an enforcement priority, or see if that person might be eligible for deportation. Any green card holder will be let back in, but the question is, will be let back in, smoothly, or will we let back in with a date to come back or to go to a hearing? And one kind of new thing that we are seeing with green card holders is about political speech, and especially if that political speech involves any criticism of the war in Gaza, that could be an issue even for a green card holder. And so, kind of another thing for even green card holders to keep in consideration. As Kirk had mentioned, there's also a new travel ban that came into effect as of yesterday. We have updated this resource, but I think hasn't made it to the website yet, so we'll get that new one up soon, just listing which specifically the countries those are and how those travel bans apply. They are for 12 countries, our general ban of travel for citizens from those countries, though there are some important exceptions, including for immediate relatives of U.S. citizens. So a U.S. citizen who's sponsored their spouse or parent to come to get a green card, they could still come. But for most, types of student visas, work visas, visitor visas, those are all kind of shut down. And then there's for 7 additional countries, a slightly more limited ban where they're allowing kind of picking and choosing a few visa types that you could still get, but the majority of other visas are not allowed. And then if you do decide to travel, your employees do decide to travel, just some considerations here about protecting yourselves while traveling, making sure you have your correct documentation, making sure that you've been in compliance with your status. So for example, the student visa holders, again, want to make sure they are showing that they are traveling to the United States for the purposes that are permitted by their visa to increase the chances or the likelihood they're going to be let back in. And make sure that there's no issue in questioning whether they have kind of the wrong purpose or intent in coming with that visa. And then something that really all of us, US citizens included, should consider is about securing electronic devices. So Kirk had mentioned earlier about the Bill of Rights and the amendments. Those don't really apply at airports. And that's because it's what we call a legal fiction, where we're basically, the law has determined that if you're at the airport, it's like you're outside of the United States asking to come in. And because you're outside of the United States asking to come in, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to you. So the Fourth Amendment, which protects against searches and seizures, also does not apply. And so that means they don't need a warrant to search your phone or your baggage. And the reason this is becoming more of a concern now is also because of the focus on political speech. And if someone has their phone searched and we see messages that are critical of the war in Gaza, or we'll see what the future holds if there's other types of speech that might be viewed as problematic, if that could cause any issues. So just some ideas about securing, thank you, Patty, devices before traveling. Depending on your specific situation, your employee's specific situation, this resource offers a few ideas. One is you could leave your devices at home so that they can't be searched when you return. Another is possibly encrypting information or deleting apps or data that you wouldn't want someone looking at. I will say information that's stored on the cloud and not on your physical device is not subject to search at the border. So, you could try to save everything on the cloud and remove it from your device. So just some general things to think about if you're traveling or if you have employees that are traveling. And this last one it's similar to the point above about a travel policy for non-citizen employees. So I think this link takes us back to the same one about the different considerations in travel for green card holders, visa holders, travel ban questions. So I think that wraps up the overview of this part of the website. And it looks like we had a couple of questions come in. Kirk, I don't know if you want to take those or if you'd like.
I don't see them here, but
Sure. Well, so we have a question about, is someone on a B1 visa considered registered?
I think do you know the answer to that one?
Yes. Yeah. So anyone
They
with
are.
with a visa in their passport has been registered. So a B1 visa, you would have to have gone to a US consulate and get a visa kind of applied to your passport. And yes, that person is registered.
Do we have any other questions?
There is another one in the chat. I can read it to you.
Sure.
I know this is a bit outside the scope of what we have discussed, but the current administration has attempted to halt Harvard's ability to enroll foreign students, which was recently blocked by a federal judge. From an attorney's perspective, is this ban and more singling out certain colleges and universities legal? Interesting question.
I don't believe it is, but I'm not a judge, and I haven't, briefed or looked at all of the authorities and documentation, but it seems to me to be particularly pernicious, and I don't think it will be upheld. I don't think the president can, without Congress, strip the ability of colleges and universities. He may be able to do it on an individualized basis, based on some, justification, but I think it's probably it's certainly suspect, and I wouldn't want to be the one defending it. How about you, Kate?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of concerns about this being a First Amendment violation if the justification is that we don't like what Harvard is teaching its students. Schools have certainly lost the right to sponsor immigrant students in the past, but that's more been because they haven't followed the regulations or the steps involved. And these are you have to make sure the students are at least in halftime status, or kind of more technical rules about you have to follow our rules if you want to play. But if this is more about we don't kind of like the way you as a school operate, there's a lot of First Amendment concerns about controlling the beliefs or the viewpoints of Harvard, which does have its own First Amendment rights.
Can I ask you a question, but it's kind of a long question, so I'd like to ask if I can. So we have an employee that is coming from Haiti. She is a foster child but they couldn't find the paperwork. So she has work permit that it is expired in 2024. But the lawyer said that Haiti has, she's under the TPS, and they said Haiti has extended the TPS work permit until 2026. Do you have any news about that?
There's been a lot of developments in the world of TPS, which is temporary protected status. Perkin mentioned is the status that the government can grant to individuals of certain countries who meet certain requirements. So there's been, the administration is attempted to terminate TPS for Haiti. There has been some automatic extensions in the past. I mean, if you're concerned about this specific individual, we could certainly, speak offline about that. But because Haitian TPS in particular is a little confusing because it's been kind of authorized for TPS twice at different times with different deadlines. But the kind of takeaway is some people with TPS from Haiti are most likely going to lose that status later this year, and others will have it probably about 6 months longer, and see if that will be renewed again. But there definitely have been automatic extensions of Haitian TPS documents. So if you have one that was facially expired, there's been kind of government announcements saying these documents have been extended through X date. And so if you'd like to kind of reach out to us individually about that, we could provide some information.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Wonderful. And we have a couple more questions in the chat. You certainly have people thinking today, so thank you for that. The first one is, what about employees who are working in private homes? Can ICE enter those homes?
Kirk, do you want to take that one?
Sure. With a proper warrant, they can, but it has to be signed by a judge and it has to identify the specific location. And the individual homeowner could refuse to admit someone into the home if there isn't a valid warrant. So yes, a workplace can be searched with a proper warrant, even if it's a private residence. We do see circumstances and issues where ICE goes to people's homes, their individual homes, to try to find them. And the best advice that is being provided to them is not to open the door and to, in essence, not communicate with the officer. To go to the window and just basically say, if you've got a warrant, hold it up to the window. Otherwise, I'm not letting you in, or go away, so that they're not, violating or obstructing justice. But once the door is open, once the person's in, it becomes more and more difficult to control the circumstances and the questions and answers that are provided. It's more difficult to exercise your rights of protection. So I certainly think the homeowner has a right to say, you can't come into my home. But again, if there's a warrant properly executed, then you have to let them in.
Okay, great. We have, again, the questions continue to come in, so I'll read them in order. How far back can they look at an individual? For example, I have an employee who is close to getting her green card. Her husband already has a green card. Is she at risk if she travels to her home country and tries to get back in? Hoping the question makes sense, and the individual they're referring to happens to be from India.
Well, it all depends upon the specifics of the situation. It's saying traveling home while you're in the process of getting a green card. There are a lot of complicated issues around that. If you have a green card application pending and you leave the US without special authorization to travel, you can be deemed to have abandoned your application. If this individual is not being processed for their green card here, but going home to be processed for their green card, then that's a different circumstance. It's not clear from the question, the particular circumstances. This is probably a question that's more individualized, and probably would make more sense to have it for the individual to seek a consultation with either our office or another immigration attorney to get the specifics. It's difficult to provide generic advice with all of the complexities around immigration law. And so, we're reluctant to give someone advice without knowing all of the background, all of the circumstances, all of the possible traps, pitfalls, and reasons why the person might be inadmissible. For example, if they had overstayed their visa here and they leave the country, that may trigger a 10-year bar on their coming back into the country. And so we definitely don't want them doing that or traveling under that circumstance.
Sure. Okay. And for reference, before I read the next question, the generic email address is up on the screen, and I know Kirk and Kate are both on LinkedIn, so you can visit the website or email or call them. The next question, Michael is the chair of our programs group here at the committee, and he has a very interesting and logical question. The administration is focusing on deporting people. Has any consideration been given to help them get documented? We don't seem to hear about that at all.
Well, there are a lot of agencies and organizations. There are, I'm going to American Immigration Lawyers Association is a professional association of 15,000 plus immigration attorneys around the country. We have an annual convention that's in Denver. I'm heading there Saturday for a convention next week. There are, the Civil Liberties Union. There's a foundation that AILA has created that funds a lot of public research and things of that sort. There are a whole variety of organizations. In fact, this maybe segues to our next slide, which is how do I get information? How do I figure out, or how do I get other resources? There's a National Immigration Law Center. Immigrant Legal Resource Center. There's the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is that professional organization that both Kate and I belong to. Here locally, there's a coalition in the Boston area called MIRA, which provides help and assistance to people. This is mostly sort of support in terms of the message and getting word out to people. That's what Kate and I are doing with you today, and what we've been doing with other organizations and trying to educate people about their rights. So that they aren't taken advantage of, so that they don't lose their rights, and so that the administration is tested on the limits of their authority. Obviously, we had an election last year, and those who felt strongly that immigration was a bad thing ultimately succeeded in electing the president and a Congress. And it's important that folks be engaged and involved. And if you found this session informational and helpful today, and you know someone who might be at risk, or know another employer who you think needs to know about some of these ways to protect themselves, certainly share that with them and let them know about it. I believe this presentation's being taped, and that I think will be made available. I leave that to you, Betsy, and to Corleen on how people can access that through the chamber. But obviously, a lot of this is word of mouth and getting out to people what's happening and how it could impact them and their businesses. And it's not just the worst or the dregs of humanity that Trump and his administration are gathering and removing from the country. It's a lot of other people who play very important roles in our economy and in our society, that care for our aging parents, or who work in jobs that other people won't do. And also that provide, when you think of Harvard and you think of some of the technology workers, some of the innovation, and a lot of what makes America the strongest economy in the world is the diversity and the level of in essence, attracting the best and the brightest by being that beacon on the hill. And right now, we're sort of isolating ourselves, moving away from the rest of the world, and creating barriers that for the long term are not going to be positive for us personally, or for our businesses, or for our economy. So I think there's a lot that everyone can do on an individualized basis, but there certainly are lots of organizations out there that are engaged. And you can certainly, if you want to get engaged or involved, you can sort of reach out. I'm sure if you just Googled immigration support agencies or things of that sort, you'd find a wealth of different resources or groups that you could become active with.
Kirk, if I could also just chime in on this question, about why aren't these people documented? The immigration law has a lot of specific categories and pathways to get status, and not everyone qualifies for one of those options, or even if they do, the wait might be decades long, depending on what country you're from, because there's yearly limits on how many people from each country can get a green card, for example. So I know this is a question in my own family that's come up. As me as the immigration attorney, relatives will ask me, well, how come they don't just apply to get a green card? And unfortunately for many people, that's not an option. And some folks that have had status up until recently, like that temporary protected status or parole, it's being terminated. So they're kind of losing their documentation status. So, as Kirk said, part of our role as attorneys and these other organizations that we are members of or interact with is to try to help people apply for some type of documentation or status if they're eligible. But not everyone is. And even those that are kind of at risk of losing that status.
Thank you both. We're beyond time, and I apologize because I got us started late. We do have 4 more questions in the chat, so we'll send those to you. We'll connect the individuals to you that asked the questions so they can reach out to you directly. I can't thank both of you enough. As somebody who works in HR, this is an issue every day. And if it's not an issue with the employees themselves, they're worried about a loved one who it is an issue for. So the fact that the two of you stepped up and volunteered to do this, the chamber couldn't be more grateful to you for that. This was obviously very timely and very, very helpful to all of us. And I do also want to remind everyone the presentation today was sponsored by Central One Federal Credit Union. You know, as a credit union, they're 100% owned by their members, by their customers. And I ask you to consider Central One when you're looking to do your business. They have been regularly recognized by the Telegram and Gazette as best companies in Massachusetts. They also have an offshoot that provides insurance for things like property and casualty, which you might not be aware of. So just really grateful for the both of you for being there, for your coworker managing the screen behind the scenes, and for everybody who shared some amazing questions today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.